I think it's high time for us to start. And we have another webinar devoted to music, and I was pleasantly surprised once again to find how many Mind Mirror friends are into music. So truly, sound is another vibration, another frequency. And here we welcome in Deborah Sewitch. You already know Deborah from our other webinars and her great comments, and of course her great webinar on sleep. But as we mentioned in our announcement, she is not only the sleep scientist, she also is very much interested in sound healing. And I would invite Deborah to start and say a few words how she ended up being interested in sound healing, and just a few words as an introduction. What did you study, with whom you studied? Because I realized that you had great teachers, and you're very, very well prepared. It looks like whatever you're interested in, you go straight and deep into it. Okay, welcome.
Okay, thank you, and welcome everybody who's attending. I got into sound really by accident, totally by accident, about 14 years ago. Well, let's see, it was 2004, so yeah, we're almost 14 years in, and it was by accident in a place called Lilydale, New York, and I think, and that was an accident how I got there, coincidence. A intuitive told me I needed to go there. So anyway, I was taking various webinars, various courses, and one was on healing, and it was hands-on healing, and so I was learning all of that, and it was under Tom Kratzky, who's very well known as a healer, and he also so he teaches this every year. So he was teaching us techniques, and all of a sudden I started to tone. And you have to understand that for me, I had no idea what this was all about. I had a classically trained voice from very early on, but I never really used it. I was trained in, basically classical, and I didn't like classical, and I didn't have a voice for anything else, really. So that was the end of that route. And anyway, I decided that probably I wouldn't, be able to make a living. So I decided I'd use my brain instead. But all of a sudden I started to tone. And, as I toned, the person got very relaxed and was very relaxed and excited that something was happening or whatever. Anyway, I was starting to tone, and the whole place became quiet. And our instructor came over to me and said, "Do you realize that you're using sound as a mechanism for healing? Just as we use hands-on, or, we use our hands, we use our prayers in order to facilitate self-healing or healing for someone else." And so that started a whole new route for me, so to speak. And I had reached a crossroads in my life where I was looking for a new route. I was looking for meaning and answers and so on, and a deeper reality than the one we live in, which is no reality at all. So so I got very excited about this, and it all went from there. So I've studied with Tom Kratzky, who also does sound, but he doesn't usually, he doesn't do it at Lilydale. And since that time, he started to do more of it, because it seems that there's a resurgence of sound healing. Sound healing is ancient. It goes back to every civilization that's ever been on the planet. And it also, is thought to be very healing by indigenous peoples. And many indigenous peoples really feel that our world and our universe were created by sound. And quite frankly, the Judeo-Christian religion also, and Islamic religion also believe that the world was created by sound, by the word. Chanting is part of every religion on the face of the planet. And there's a reason for the chanting. It takes you to another level of consciousness, another state, another dimension. And so we can use this for self-healing. And I've always known that we have tremendous abilities to heal ourselves from within. And that's what I'm very interested in, because I've seen that from without doesn't really work too well. There are certain conditions that obviously, you know, from without you can really facilitate healing, but then something has to happen within the person in order for them to really benefit from that healing. I truly believe that. I mean, if you have a replaced hip, or you've gone through cancer and you've survived it, part of that is because you within yourself also did a lot of work and did a lot of healing work. It was not only the doctors and the surgeons and whatever else they use, but you at some level had to do your own healing, and from a very, very deep place within, because this body is a very superficial body. We all have an energetic self and a core that transcends this dimension, this body. And in order for us to heal the body, that core has to be operating as well. So this is what you hear from Chinese medicine, you know, the whole idea of qi or energy or prana from the Buddhist tradition, from the Hindu tradition. It is all about accessing that energy, our energetic self, our soul, whatever you want to call it, the universal field that we plug into, accessing that for our own healing. And there are many ways of doing that. Meditation is one, contemplation is another. Sound is probably the easiest and most natural form of healing for us to actually use. So anyway, from that point, I studied with Tom Kenyon, Jonathan Goldman. You may know some of these names in sound healing. And in fact, his wife, Andy, she actually found a little Tibetan bowl. She actually finds these bowls for people that sound like dolphins. And I'll actually play that. I had that sitting here, and I will play that later on. There it is. I just took a look where that is, because I have a lot of things set up for demonstration as well. So it started 14 years ago and has just kind of grown organically since then. And that's what I want to share with you today, because the human voice is probably the most complex of all instruments that exists on the face of the planet, and everything that we've developed actually develops from the human voice. So you all have the power to use that. And I'm sure that anecdotally, everybody here has experienced how music affects you. Different types of music you will love. Other types of music you will despise. You can't stand it. You have to get away from it. And just to, you know, the physics of sound travels easiest through liquid. And we're 80%. You know, water, made up of water, and even our planet is covered some 75% by water. So the planet itself, which is like a giant magnet, is also an amazing conductor of sound. So that's just something to keep in mind. I like to start this, any kind of talk about sound with, talking about Edgar Cayce, who is probably the father of homeopathic medicine in the United States, and also was the sleeping prophet. And he predicted years ago that sound would be the medicine of the future. And I think that's finally coming into its own. It had a real renaissance during the 70s and 80s, and then kind of got lost and had another renaissance in the 90s. And now it's coming again. So I think we might finally be there, because we see that, particularly if you look at medicine right now, ultrasonic waves are being used in all sorts of ways, not only to visualize what's going on inside a person, but also to heal. It's also being used now to heal, the body, to speed it up, to accelerate healing is probably the best way to put it. And they use it, after surgery. It's good for blood flow, increasing blood flow. A lot of people who are athletes in sports and have had injuries will have ultrasonic treatment to accelerate the healing. So let's go back to some of the science behind this. I mean, is there any science behind what sound does? Well, we now have an entire physics that is in fact built around waves, okay? Wave phenomenon, wave and vibrating strings. And again, in all the ancient cultures, it has been recognized that, sound has been the creator, if you will. There is a primordial sound that gives birth to the universe. This is certainly true in the Hindu religion. This is true in Australian Aborigines who believe, the didgeridoo, actually some sound that is very similar to the didgeridoo actually brought the universe into being. For Hindus and Buddhists, it's the sound of Om, the bija seed sound of Om that brought the whole universe into being. So if we look at what is known about sound waves, and you go back quite a ways here to I can't pronounce his name, but I think it's Chladni. Ernst Chladni, who was German physicist and a musician. He basically is considered the father of acoustics, and he invented a technique to show how sound actually reorganizes matter. That sound waves can actually organize and actually destroy matter. So he was following Robert Hooke, who also observed what they call these nodal patterns of vibration. So you take a plate, some sort of a metal plate, and you can use sand, you can use water, you can use oil, and you apply a vibration to it, a tone, and you see that when the tone actually vibrates the plate, you will get waves that, waves that form in opposite directions, and places where there's no vibration at all. So Robert Hooke was the first to take a violin bow, use a bow, as a tone generator or a vibrator to a plate. And he used simple flour on the plate to show that you got these very unique patterns that gave form to that flour. So let's look at what some of this looks like. This was the method he used. It is still a method that's used today. You can take any kind of a bow. You can set up if you have a speaker, you can take the speaker and you set the plate above the speaker, and you administer a tone through the speaker, or you can use this a bow and just vibrate the plate directly, and you will get these patterns. So I'm going to show you some of that. Now the person in modern day, modern times, who's really given a voice to all of this in our century, or I should say the last century, has been Hans Jenny. And Hans Jenny, J is actually pronounced as Y, he's Swiss. Hans Jenny, who is now, of course, deceased, you can see that, and he actually died in the early 70s. He was a physician, interestingly enough, but he was a world traveler. He was very interested in philosophy. He came from a very educated family, and he studied medicine to have a profession, but he was also a natural scientist. He loved doing experiments and playing with things. And he also was the student of Rudolf Steiner. Now, a lot of our modern New Age philosophy, how we feel about other dimensions, spirituality, really comes from the theosophical tradition, which has been around for 400 years. And Rudolf Steiner was a theosophist, but he broke away from the main group. So he developed his own, his own body of knowledge, if you will, anthroposophy. And Hans Jenny was a student of Rudolf Steiner and was very interested in these ideas of other dimensions, of other energies, of a field, a universal consciousness. So he was looking at sound, and he was familiar with the Chladni effect, and started to do a lot of experiments with it, and actually published 2 very well-known volumes on what he named as cymatics. And today, that is what has really carried on this tradition of sound physics, if you will, and the spirituality side of sound grounded in science. So it's the study of wave phenomenon, or the study of vibration. And I'm going to actually show you some videos now of what this looks like. And I think you're going to be amazed if you've never seen this before. All right, so let's take a look at some of the work he did. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you a TED Talk, and I hope this works. Connect to YouTube.
We recommend you to pause the webinar video now and follow the active link to watch YouTube video.
It explains it, but it also suggests that, we should be studying it more. And when I show you some of my demonstrations, you'll see what I'm saying. Cymatics, I think, could open the door to an awful lot of really powerful insights into how sound is affecting us, and how we can use sound in a positive way. Not only to heal ourselves, but also artistically. And that is what's happening at this point.
We recommend you to pause the webinar video now and follow the active link to watch YouTube video. Thank you.
Okay. This was the original film by Hans Jenny. This was original footage from Hans Jenny.
We recommend you to pause the webinar video now and follow the active link to watch YouTube video. Thank you.
Oh, this is water. This is amazing. Okay, this is water, something that you can set up at home.
We recommend you to pause the webinar video now and follow the active link on your screen to watch the relevant YouTube video to understand what we are talking about later. Thank you.
Wow, that's actually worth setting up.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
It's really not difficult, but I mean, you need the equipment. You need a speaker, and you need some connectors and so on, and a tone generator. And that's it. And then you just turn on the water.
Yeah.
All right. That's the power of sound.
Yeah, I think people sing, kind of light music, but it is nothing compared to water music.
Exactly. So when you read in the Bible that Joshua, the wall around Canaan, when he said, make a noise, make all the noise, he hit the actual frequency of the wall. Everything has a key frequency. We actually don't know a lot about electromagnetism. I mean, we're just really exploring all of the intricacies of it. And in fact, our whole world is a whole electromagnetic field. And we have our own electromagnetic fields around us, which I'm going to show you through the theremin. And all of this is sort of ignored. It's all, at the fringe of really study. Now it's starting to be explored because of quantum physics. Quantum physics actually opened up other dimensions to us. And for the first time, we went beyond our senses or beyond instruments that were just there to amplify our senses. I mean, part of why, you know, all of the New Age is written off so frequently by mainstream is because it can't be perceived directly a lot of times by our five senses. And we are so dependent on these five senses, which really filter all our sensory input. I mean, we really are seeing such a myopic view of the totality of our world. And only now is science starting to realize that, and it's really because of quantum physics and all of the advances that have been made in quantum physics, and how a lot of the mathematics can't be directly perceived, and you have to take a leap of faith. There has to be a leap of faith in order for you to continue to do the experiments to demonstrate these mathematical principles. So they're sticking sensors where they expect some sort of a particle to show up, and sure enough it shows up, but they can't perceive that directly through any of our sensory apparatus or even any of the tools that amplify those senses. It is beyond our senses. It is beyond us. So this just, I think, emphasizes, and what you and your partner are working on emphasizes just how little we really understand or know about our existence, and that there's so much more to it. And that's what gave impetus to all of the theosophists who have come through the centuries. They knew there was something more, because they had all sorts of epiphanies or dreams or visions or whatever, and they couldn't explain it by any kind of sense that was tied to this dimension. It's that simple. So we're now only starting to explore these other dimensions and how they work with us. And sound, we live in an environment that is polluted by sound, as well as helped or facilitated by sound. And a lot of people just don't realize it. I mean, when I'm driving in my car, I listen to the car next to me that has something, blasting that I can hear in my car. And I'm wondering, not only are they going deaf in there, but what is that doing to all of their organs? I mean, that kind of vibration is dramatic. And we are, basically fluid. So all of that's going right in and vibrating your organs and everything else in your body. And it's vibrating at a very heavy duty, frequency. So yeah, I think that is altering their DNA, all right? I think that is altering their cells, all right, in ways that, we don't even understand yet. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. It's not only climate change, it's everything. It's the whole electromagnetic field being bombarded by everything we're creating, all right? The good as well as the bad. And that's something that I don't think is really appreciated. So let's go to the slideshow. So I'm now at the point of talking about the chakras and the musical notes. Now, depending on who you read, or whether you're looking at the Tibetan system or the Vedic system, you will have a different set of notes. Most of us are following the Vedic system, and this is the colors and the musical notes that are associated with the Vedic system. Now, the chakras, again, I'm talking to the choir here. So the chakras are the meaning of chakra is basically spinning wheel. And it's a spinning wheel of vibration, of vibrational energy. So we have 7 of them that are main channels, but there are many, 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 many more. But all of the energy channels, if you will, going through the bodies, the nadis, basically terminate in these core 7 chakras that run up our core, our spinal column, and or our center, if you want to look at it that way. And we start at the bottom, the base, which is the root, and that is a C. And this, so that's the root chakra. And then D for the sacral chakra, E for the solar plexus, F for the heart chakra, G for the throat chakra, A for what we call the third eye, and B for the crown. So if we take a look at how the frequencies are matched up to the chakras and various seed bijas, which are the sacred tones or the sacred sounds, as well as elements and energy associated with the various core chakras. The root is C. It's 256 hertz. The vowel is A. The seed bija, the bija sound would be lam. Earth is the element. Thunder, grounding. So I've gone through each one, and this is basically according to Jonathan Goldman's schema. And his is probably the most widely followed in the West, even though there are slightly different versions of this. But, okay, so the second, the sacral, would be D, 288 hertz. U, Vam, water, ocean, life. Solar plexus is power or the self. It's also the ego. It's an E, 320 hertz. O, ram, fire, roaring flames, and power, our seat of power. And if this rings, you know, if this resonates, it's because basically our world is still stuck at the solar plexus. That's where we are. We're still at power. We'd like to be at heart, but we're not there yet. We've got a ways to go. So heart, F, 341.3 hertz, ah, yam, air, wind, love. And that's where we'd like to be now. And throat, G, 384 hertz, I, ham, ether, cricket, the sound of a cricket, and communication. I will say this, we are moving in the direction of heart. And if you've ever gone out into nature and really tried to listen to the wind or the air, you're really centered in your heart chakra. And I know for myself, I love the spring when those winds come through, and it's just such a breath of fresh air. So now throat, G, 384 hertz, I, ham, ether, cricket, communication. Third eye is A, 426.7 hertz, A, sham, and it's all the elements, and it's bells. And I think that the association of sound with various religions, you have a lot of bells that are ringing in churches, and of course in the Eastern religion, bells are always used, and insight. So the seventh is the crown, it's B, and it's 480 hertz, and E is associated, the vowel, Om, which we all are very familiar with, and it also is all elements, including ether, Om, and transcendence. Okay, so I was going to also just briefly mention the Qigong, or the Chinese medicine version of sound healing. And this too varies a little bit on the system of Qigong that you're working with. But basically you have the 5 organ systems in traditional Qigong and what they call the triple burner. And the organ systems are the liver, the heart, the spleen, the lung, and the kidney. And these are basically the basically the sounds that are associated with these 5 organ systems. And I also have a link so you can hear it being said or sounded in Chinese, you know, by a master, a Qigong master. So there's a very nice link here that actually shows you the sound. It actually demonstrates the sounds for you in little sound clips. But it's basically shi, ham, hun, sh. So those are the traditional sounds in Qigong. And if you want to hear, I can actually show that to you. Hu, si, chui. I'm going to start with the theremin, and this one I will show you. It is a TED Talk.
We recommend you to pause the webinar video now and follow the active link on your screen to watch the relevant YouTube video to understand what we are talking about later. Thank you.
This is a Moog theremin. So let me tell you what Leon did. Leon Theremin, back in the early 20s, he was actually Russian, and he came to the US for a brief time, but he was also a spy. He's a fascinating guy. But he was an inventor, a physicist, and he worked with shortwave radio. I mean, you know, he worked on breaking codes. And one day it said, I mean, this is the story, that he got too close to, the device, what he was working on. They had gases in it, but it also was sending out sound waves. He was trying to work on a code. He got too close, and he noticed that the pitch changed. And then he backed away, and it shifted again. And he thought, well, isn't this interesting? What a phenomenon. It's some sort of a field, and we're interacting with the field. Both we have a field, and he had set up an electromagnetic field. And so he said, well, maybe, you know, I can do something with that. I'd like to play around with it. So he started working on an actual instrument, and this is what he came up with. And it essentially is an antenna that is hooked into some sort of a speaker. And then you also have another end to it, which cuts, increases the sound. And people who have learned to play this musically have to completely unlearn what they learned through reading notes. They have to do it all by ear and their hand movements. So they have to train themselves to actually hear the notes through their movements and then memorize the movements. And it's very, very sensitive. If you come towards the antenna, you're going to get sound, and you have to learn to control that. And you also have to learn to control your body, because if your body accidentally moves with the hand, you're going to affect the sound. So the only thing that I want to bring out with this is, and I can play some, different. This is this is not an original theremin. The original theremins were in boxes, and you can get an actual classical theremin, but they make these synthesizers now. And this is a Moog Theremin Mini. And so it has all different sounds, and this is what they came out with in the 50s. And this formed the soundtrack to a lot of those sci-fi space movies that you saw. This was actually the soundtrack to them. And then it fell out of favor, and now it's coming back into vogue. But basically what I'm trying to bring out with this is that it's the interaction of electromagnetic fields, and we have a field around us. So that last slide shows a meditating woman with her field, the field that develops around her as she meditates. We have a field that is around us. It's interacting with other people, but interacts with everything. And the theremin just brings that, or highlights it. It emphasizes this field and how it interacts. And if it comes into connection with another electromagnetic field, you're going to get effects. So that's what I wanted to show you with that. And if you get the Theremin Mini from Moog, you get various, you get all sorts of different effects that you can, bring in. So this one is a classical theremin. I can change it and go to another one. And you can set it for different keys. But on the classical theremin, you have to do all of that by hand. You can't set it on anything. So these are quartz crystal bowls. And right now I'm going to give you a little sound bath. So relax. You can close your eyes. And then we'll talk a little bit about it. But all right, so these are actual therapeutic quartz crystal clear bowls. I also have the frosted bowls, but when you are using this to help someone or to conduct a healing session, you will tend to want to use these clear crystal bowls. Quartz crystal has pure notes. These are pure note bowls, and you're able to walk around with them because they have handles. And so that allows you to move the bowl around the person to give them the benefit of a complete enveloping of sound. And that's what you're basically doing with these bowls. They are tuned to different chakra notes. And it really is not necessary to have a bowl for every chakra. Whatever resonates with you personally is what you would want to use. And so these are healing therapeutic bowls. You can also get the frosted bowls. I'm going to play one for you, my heart bowl, which is huge. And a lot of times they're used in performance or for sound baths where you have a group of people and you're going to give them a sound bath. You will tend to more likely use your frosted bowls, and you'll have them lined up. They're beautiful. I'll show you what they look like. And you'll have them lined up, and you literally play a little concert with your frosted bowls. But these are therapeutic bowls that you can actually use for yourself by passing it around your body, as well as an individual one-on-one session with someone. And you notice I started to tone with it, but I realized that you'll feel what is best for the group that you're working with or the person. And I realized that it was more important for you to just hear how these bowls work together without the human voice. Always remember, and I think anecdotally we all learn this at some point, when we're not feeling good or we feel kind of crappy, if we just tone or sing or do something, we bring ourselves into a better mood. So don't be afraid to use your voice. In our society, particularly in Western society, we've been socialized not to speak, not to express ourselves, and to suppress all of that. And I think that's what's made a lot of people very sick, because they can't express their authentic truths, their own ideas. They're not encouraged to speak, to tone, to chant. You'll find if you have a practice, if you're using the mind mirror, just make some tones that feel good to you while you're using the mind mirror, and you can see what kind of effects it has. Sound can be used the same as quiet meditation. For some people, just using bowls and sounding or toning to themselves, and you're not singing, you're toning. So it doesn't matter how it sounds. Nobody else is there. You tone for yourself. Sometimes you're going to make really ugly noises, and you need to make those ugly noises because you got to get that out. You have to get your energy to flow. And we're so afraid of not being socially correct or politically correct or any kind of correct for other people. Be correct for yourself. And so one way to kind of counterbalance what society has repressed in each of us is to actually use your voice to express or tone to yourself. And when you tone, you're not singing, so you're not saying words. That's why we tend to use vowels. Vowels in all cultures are sacred. In fact, in Judaism, the Torah, which has, all the Hebrew and it only has consonants. There are no vowels. Rabbis and cantors have to actually memorize the entire Torah because there are no vowels. You don't write vowels down because they can be erased. They're sacred. They're like energetic beings. Same thing in Sanskrit, the bija seed sounds. These are sacred sounds, and they are entities or energies in and of themselves, so you don't write them down. So tone on vowels. Vowels are very easy to tone on. And we can try that before the end of this session. We'll do a couple of those, but that can be very meditative, as well as mantras. You know, any kind of the mantras. If you have a special mantra that you enjoy, that you like, usually you want to keep it short, even if it's only Om or Lam or Ram or whatever. You can really keep it very short and just allow yourself to express it in any way that you feel is appropriate and helpful to you at that point in time. But the bowls make it very easy. And the bowl I tend to really use is an E-bowl. And it is the solar plexus, yes, but you'll see that it sings for me. And the bowl picks you. You don't pick the bowl. So you want to hear whatever it is that you might want to use. So if you're buying this off of line, if you want to buy a bowl for yourself, you make sure they play the bowls for you and you get to listen to them. And you pick the one that resonates with you. And that's the one that you use. If you're using multiple bowls, that's fine. You don't just pick it because it matches a certain chakra that you happen to like or want to imitate or whatever. I mean, if it resonates when you hear it, then that's fine. If it doesn't, don't pick it based on what chakra it's associated with. Pick it with how it resonates with you sound-wise, and that will be the most helpful bowl for you. So that's how you would choose these bowls, and I highly recommend it. Even if you just buy it for yourself, buy one for yourself. And I have no skin in this game. I'm not getting any revenues from any bowl company, but I found that it can be very helpful, and it also gives you a feeling of mastery over yourself and gets you in touch with your inner self. So I'll take questions. I'll first show you some of the frosted crystal bowls that you may have seen displayed in various places, because they make beautiful decorative objects to even have in your home.
Yes.
Right. All right, now I'm going to play it.
We got the impression. I can only say, if people ever have a chance to go to place where they do play these crystal bowls, because I personally visited one of these sound baths when I was in Bali, and I can tell you they played similar, like this frosty, or how you call them, this big bowls that you were playing last. Tuned to different chakras, and if you lie on the floor and they put next to you one of these bowls playing, so it was your whole body going through the wave, the sound wave from the vibration, and it felt very, very relaxing and very good. It felt great, absolutely great. You know, you don't expect so much power from a sound wave, but you can feel your whole body, you know, vibrating and resonating, and it gives you this deeper awareness of how we are affected by sound. And of course it gives you healing because it's very enjoyable.
This is it. It's very hard to explain. You really do need to experience it, and it makes all the difference. I've given my brother a little sound bath, and he's fallen right to sleep. A lot of people will fall asleep during these sound baths. And I'm going to now demonstrate my little my dolphin bowl, which is a Tibetan bowl, okay? So it's 7 different metals. These are not pure tones. But it's 7 different metals that give you a very complex harmonic with overtones, and that's why they use them. And again, in the Tibetan temples where they do a lot of sound work, either by chanting and or with bowls, usually both, they will literally reach the resonant frequency of the walls of the temple, and the temple will sing with their bowls and with their voices.
Wow.
And you find the same thing in cathedrals. That's why the cathedrals were built the way they were built, so that they were actual sound chambers, and the chanting would resonate with the walls of the cathedral. So here is a demonstration of my precious little dolphin bowl. So if we combine that with one of the crystal bowls, I'll try. Okay, so I think now I can open it up to questions or what have you. We've been going for a while now.
I personally found that, like, from the beginning, when I saw these particles moving on the screen, I've seen somatics this before, but I never really saw the details of it. And it made me think that while the sound is moving the smallest particles, it reminded me of how, you know, the particles in our body actually move, you know, the atoms, the molecules, all this constant motion, you know, life. And I mean, really, if you look deep into how we are made on that basic level, you'll see just a dance of particles, really. And that's what we are, and that's what cymatics kind of shows you very vividly. And then the other thing I realized today was with this theremin, with this instrument, I never realized that actually the movement is also, you know, creating the wave and creating this interaction and relationship of you know, how we relate to each other. That's why, you know, I think dancing can be another therapy, and there are lots of, you know, this integrative dance or healing dance, or call it any way you like. It's so liberating, and at the same time it teaches people, because I attended one of these classes in Russia, and it teaches people to interact with each other through movement, through dance, which I know that, I mean, again, many people in Western society, we're quite rigid, and we are not, you know, fully tuned to express ourselves and feel our bodies and interact on that deep level of awareness. And my question to Deborah will be, we've seen this nice, you know, you explained the frequencies behind chakras. And you explained that when you go to Om, I think it was one of the highest chakras, how would you relate this to the frequencies of the brain waves that we see on the mind mirror?
Mm-hmm.
Because do you see any connection? And the second question will be, do you think if we sing Om, because it kind of embraces all the frequencies, is it likely we are going to open awakened mind or maybe evolved mind pattern?
Mm-hmm. I really believe that to be true. I think it is another form of meditation that is extremely effective. And now again, we all meditate differently. So for some people, sound will be, just an eye-opener, a eureka moment. For others, it's not going to be sound. It's going to be silent meditation, or it might be dance, it might be movement. I think that getting into an awakened mind state is the same thing that happens when you get into the zone, what they call the zone, all right? Athletes forget that they're even in their body. They don't have any awareness of thinking. They just become one with what they're doing. The same thing happens with an actor who gets into the part so completely and into the character so completely, they lose themselves. That is, I believe, the awakened mind or even the evolved mind pattern. So whatever gets you into that zone state, that certainly has been the premise behind heart math and heart rate variability. Getting into a heart rate variability coherent state gets you into that zone, and all of a sudden you're one with everything else, and you're not outside of yourself, but you do not see yourself as a separate entity. You no longer relate to yourself as an ego, an individual. It melts away. You become one with what you're doing. And I do believe that that is synonymous with an awakened mind pattern. And, it's great to get into these states, when you're by yourself or on a mountaintop or in a retreat. But we have to be able to call on these states in our everyday lives and be able to live these states. And it is the translation of the meditative state or in, isolation to everyday living that is so critical now, I believe. And so, yes, in answer to your question, definitely. I think these are all, if you were doing sound or toning or bowls while you were doing the mind mirror, I believe that you would start to see more of an awakened mind and eventually perhaps even an evolved mind pattern, depending on how into this experience you are able to get.
May I say something? Because I see awakened mind as a just reflection of whether we have access to different these ranges of frequencies, right? It's just a reflection whether we can freely flow the energy from, beta to alpha, theta, delta, back and forth, and we have access, right? That's the collection of frequencies. We are not locked, beta, and we are all separate, and it doesn't, it has problems moving, right, and accessing different frequencies. That's what I think. It's just the brain waves that we see on the mind mirror will be simply the reflection of the field having access to those different frequencies. And to be in zone that you say, I see it as, yes, just having the energy flowing freely and having access open to you. And same with chakras, they're just either blocked or open, or, it's just how well the energy is circulating and whether you have access to those, higher frequencies if you want to feel these higher states, right, and stay connected and interact in an efficient way and healthy way and harmonious way with the world, a richer way, really.
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's access, but it's a little more than access. It is actually being able to be in that state, to have it almost automatic, a more natural state of being, so that it's not really separate from, you know, another state, you know, a lower state or whatever you want to call it. Certainly when you're vibrating at a higher frequency, and this is what we see in sound, you're not going to get sick. Okay, sickness and disease in different organ systems, and this is consistent with the Chinese tradition of qi. Sickness and disease of organ systems is seen more of a blockage of qi and a blockage of energy that can't move. And once you get it moving, so higher frequencies are associated with freely moving qi, whereas lower frequencies are associated with kind of stuck qi. It's hard to move it around. So yes, movement, getting your metabolic rate up, is going to move your frequency up. So moving, sound, you know, being fully involved in your environment, all of this is going to move your frequency up. So, and that helps qi to move freely. And we all have periods in our lives when we're stressed out and we feel overwhelmed, and that's when our energy level goes right down. If you notice during those periods, you want to stay in bed all day. You want to pull the covers over the head and stay in bed all day. You don't want to move. You don't want to eat. You don't want to do anything that causes your frequency to increase. So you're going in the opposite direction. So definitely, these are techniques that you can use in your tool chest to help you move your frequency up and get out of those states, so that you do become more involved in the environment and more involved in interacting with others, and you move around. Okay, you know, very important. So I think you're absolutely right there. But if you want to see it, that's where the mind mirror comes in, because that allows you then to maybe see these changes occur and, you know, feel that you're on the right track, so to speak. It's a form of feedback. It's biofeedback. And we're going to actually do a little exercise. All right, so this is an app showing cymatic. All right, so as I'm speaking, do you see how the cymatic pattern is changing? It's picking up my voice. So now let's take a nice deep breath, and we're going to come out with an Om. Ready?
Wait, first, Deborah, do you want us to sing the same note as you?
No, you can sing any note that feels good to you. Let's try that and see if we can get a nice complex pattern. So any note that is good to you, because I'll be very low. I'll tend to be low, and if you're a soprano, you're going to want to be higher. So please, any note that feels good, and you know, that's fine. So let's take a nice deep breath and come out with Om on the out breath. Nice deep breath in. Shall we try it again? Let's see if we have it. Is there another one, another sound that people would feel better with? Shall we can try some vowels. How's that? Okay. All right, that's great. Okay, so it's really
It was fun to see the notes change.
Isn't it?
Let's do it some more, because what we're looking at then is our collective sound.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's picking it up. Now we can do some vowels. Generally, you would do a cycle of I, E, A, O, U. How's that? So it's I, E, A, O, U. So let's try that on one breath and see what happens and how you feel. And am I coming across too loud so you can't pick your own? Yeah, all right. So let me try to mute, go back. Okay, ready? Big in breath. Great. Do you see? I stopped and it was just you guys, and you see how it's coming out? So let's try it again, and I'm not even going to sing this time. I'm going to just let you all do the vowels. So big in breath, and on the out breath, yeah, let me get this straight so you can see it. Big in breath, out breath, and start. Wow. Okay, so we'll stop that.
All
Okay.
Do this. Maybe we should do this as, you know, a little bit of tuning to each other and team building before each webinar. We'll see, and then everyone will resonate instantly with each other. It's very easy to do.
Oh yeah, and that's what you find. I mean, we actually entrain each other. Remember, we were talking about this with the mind mirror and the heart, and I was saying, when Judith, you showed us two going simultaneously, I said they're entraining each other. These two know each other. So we do that naturally, and we don't realize it. You wonder how Trump got elected? Okay, he found a resonant frequency and he entrained everybody to him. And he was very good at it, okay? So we forget how easily we entrain to each other, whether it's positive or it's negative. And that's something that if you don't take anything else away from this seminar, I hope you'll take with you, and understand that if you want to be different from the mass, I will purposely leave a crowd. When I feel that energy is going in a certain direction, I walk out, because I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to be entrained by it if I stay. You've got to recognize that, and that's how we can, quote unquote, protect ourselves, so to speak, because we are easily entrained by each other's field. And the bigger the field of the one standing up in front of you, the more influence they're going to have on your field, and vice versa, for positive or for negative. And that's something, because we think all of this is still woo-woo and, you know, it's out there somewhere, because it's not part of our usual five senses. But more and more mainstream is recognizing, because of physics and the advances of physics, showing that there are dimensions and other universes out there that we can't even touch yet. But we know they're there, because we have the mathematics for it. And if we stick a sensor where it's supposed to show up, it shows up. All right. Now that's literally how they're making these discoveries. Okay. And so that is also your argument for ultimately some kind of a universal force or Godhead, because something's got to be sensing us in order for us to exist. It's that simple. So, you know, I think we're on the verge of making a great big leap in consciousness, but it's not going to be graceful. It is not going to be easy, and there are going to be a lot of fits and starts before we get there. And we're living through it. We're actually living through it. So I guess that's how I'll basically leave it for other comments or other questions. But I thought you'd enjoy that with the app. So you can now actually view what your voice is doing and how these complex patterns come into being. And keep in mind, the more complex the cymatic pattern that you get, and you'll see a lot of these on websites now. They actually have cymatic photographs now on their websites, especially if they're into sound healing. So the more complex, the more harmonics you're getting, overtones. Well, there is nothing more complex than the human voice. Keep it in mind, and that we all possess, and that's our gift. Okay, so that's how I'll leave this.
Well, I want to just thank you, Deborah, for that lovely little toning. It energized me tremendously. And I don't know if you know that that's an Edgar Casey. There's this wonderful little book called music as the bridge, that I found at the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the Edgar Cayce's, and it was written by an opera singer who went through the Cayce readings and found his, well, the chants and the toning that he said were used in Egypt in ancient times for health and for healing. And he has another one that I've got on one of my CDs, and it's so cool. It goes like this. And you can hear
you hear the overtones. There are these overtones, and
just by closing your mouth on that M, then the sound starts to bounce around inside the head, and it's really wonderfully healing. And then the other thing is that I know you've studied with Jonathan Goldman, and I've had some extraordinary experiences using his chanting, which starts this ooh, oh, I, a, e, ooh. And then you repeat that. And one time, some years ago, I was a field speaker for the ARE, and I was in Seabeck, Washington, and had 80 people in the audience over a weekend retreat. And I'm allergic to wheat. So that night, somebody told me that there wasn't wheat on a Saturday night in the meal, and I ate the wheat, and I woke up the next morning just wiped out. My head was full, raging headache. You know, I could feel my life force was just drained out, and yet I had to get up on Sunday morning with my guitar and my zither and workshop all day long with these people. And I thought, what the heck am I going to do? And I sat down and said, I need to meditate on this. And turned out what I got was to do that Jonathan Goldman toning. I got up from that after less than 5 minutes, and I was perfect, just perfect. So in real life situations, how do we raise our frequencies, as Cayce taught us, for one, back to their original vibration when something has made them drop off? Well, that's your sound. That's everything you've taught here and shown us here. And I don't know if you have the Jonathan Goldman written out on a piece of paper, but I do, and I can send it to Oksana for putting up next to this webinar. So
I think that would be great. That's part of my table. That's, if you look at that table, those are the vowels he's using. Now, again, depending on who it is, but those are the vowels that came to him, that he channeled through and that have worked for him. And he is just wonderful. So I certainly, I would love you to put that up there, because whatever he comes up with is after years of working with it and realizing that this is really very valuable on a mass scale. And, you know, he also has the names of God. You know, he has that CD. So these are other sounds that he works with. But yes, definitely. And you see how quickly it works. I mean, it is amazing how fast this whole thing will work for you out in the field. As you said, out in the field when you have to raise your vibration. Now, another person to keep an eye on is John Stewart Reed. And he's very into cymatics and really demonstrating the science behind it, and in a way that people can relate to, so through our senses. So he's made these apps and these instruments in order for you to actively record your cymatic pattern with vocalization and take pictures of it or do whatever it is that you want to do with it. So there are people who are working very actively in the field, but when you brought up Edgar Cayce and Egypt, he actually went to the Great Pyramid in Egypt And he actually made sound recordings inside the Great Pyramid. And the resonance chamber, it's almost as though they were built to be resonance sound chambers. So yes, yeah, everybody got buried there, but they also apparently used them for sound and for sound healing. And the Kabbalists, these are Jewish mystics who use the Kabbalah. They would sound in groups, all right? They would have a chief person sounding, and then they would sound in groups around a person. And I believe that is also, what they suspect or what they believe the Egyptians did as well. They would have a small select group and then a chief, if you will, the one who was facilitator and would kind of lead the rest and act as a drone in the background, and the others would chant around. So they would do their sound healing around the person that way. And they built these chambers to optimize the resonance of the sound that they were emanating. And in modern times, you have, I'm trying to think of the structure. It is a completely round dome. That will also, the more round you have with no angles, the larger the resonant chamber and the more powerful that chamber is as a resonator of any sound that is produced within it. And I'm trying to think of the name, and right now I can't, but you've seen these. It was an inventor in the last century. All of this happened in the last century. That's something to keep in mind. We're now working 40, 50 years after, and Sammy has now joined us, but 40, 50 years, I know Sammy, 40, 50 years afterwards, we're resurrecting a lot of this older material that never really got off the ground, but now seems to be blossoming again.
Hey, Deborah, can I ask you another question? You said early on that people are using some kind of ultrasonic healing. I don't know a thing about this. What's happening with who's doing that and what are they doing?
Okay, they're actually, it's a big debate whether it's working or not, whether it works in mainstream medicine. But a lot of clinics are actually using ultrasound waves to help muscles heal faster and ligaments heal faster. It apparently is an accelerator. And the reason is that it does increase blood flow and circulation. So by increasing blood flow and circulation, at least that is the hypothesized mechanism for now. That'll change probably, but by increasing the blood flow and the circulation around the injured muscle or ligaments, you facilitate the healing. So they are using ultrasound, which they apply directly, and of course they've been using low frequency electrical current. Those are the TENS units that you're familiar with and that you can buy. And a lot of people have, thought that they had very good success with it. Again, mainstream medicine is on the fence about this. Some really who are more homeopathic or naturopathic do feel that it definitely accelerates the healing. And but as far as large-scale, randomized, controlled clinical trials, no. And it seems to be more of an individualized effect. Some people respond very well to it, others don't. And unfortunately, when you have large randomized clinical trials done at different places and you combine the data, a lot of times you'll wash out your effects. One clinic has great effects and the other one doesn't. Well, when you combine all that data, you end up with a cancellation effect, or you end up with no effect at all, or a very small effect size. So that's what kind of happens unless it's a very large effect that is very easily reproduced, and you can really standardize the methodology across all the sites. So I would not, just because you don't have the large clinical trial across multiple sites, I don't think that is any reason to knock off the therapy, because there are a number of clinics that have had very good success with it. and the patients swear by it. And you'll see the athletes, all of your Olympic athletes, they will use these techniques. If they have an injury, they will definitely have ultrasonic therapy applied to the injury, especially if they have a big meet coming up.
I wonder if John Farron, if you've heard about this or seen it.
Yes, I mean, there's any number of things. I think the electromagnetic stuff for bone healing has been studied and so forth, and I think there's probably the most provocative evidence currently with treatment modalities is tied to genetic markers. So the kind of thing Deborah's talking about with studies, it's clearly you have things that work, but then you do a big study and you wash it out. Well, the question is what works with which people, and are genetic markers able to do that? I wanted to throw in one thing real quickly, is that my Reiki and breathwork teacher 30-some years ago taught us to hum. And so in the ER, I used to have people hum into their chest, for example, with chest pain. And one of the things that I wanted to mention that came up when Deborah was talking earlier that I thought might be fun, Judith, is that one of the other things you can do is you can do silent humming into different parts of your body. And as you resonate in those different parts of the body, whether they're chakras or whatever, you can use that. I'd like to hook my mind mirror up and start paying attention to my different areas that I silently hum into. And I think one of the things that, well, it's funny, Deborah's talking about getting out of entrainment. You can silently hum back, or even if you're in a crowd that's noisy, you can hum into parts of your stuff and hold your own field. And I think that's really important to prevent let's call it mass hysteria, which is what our last election is about, semi-mass hysteria. Anyway, I just threw that out because I think, yes, there's all sorts of stuff that's been done. And, I use shamanic stones in the ER just because they're fun, and all sorts of vibrational stuff is available. But I do think it really needs to be emphasized how important individual variation is, because and it's some of it, there's elements that are belief. I mean, I worked with a seventh son of an Irishman at one point, and I don't happen to have the belief system, and I didn't find his effects profound, but many people do. And so, and then other things work for me that my own practices, including Qigong, I think are incredibly powerful, and many people don't get any benefit. So I think, trying different stuff, and that was really fun, Deborah. I liked all the different stuff you did.
Can anybody? I just want to throw something in that is a little bit different. And if you're, I don't know who's familiar with the Penrose-Hamerhoff hypothesis of consciousness arising out of the quantum field, basically. But Hamerhoff is a anesthesiologist, but he has a theory of neurophysiology that, anyway, he's talking about the energy requirements or the energy vibrations within the cells. And when we look at the EEG, we're looking at about 10 to the 1 hertz. Okay, so, and the sound frequencies you're talking about here are about 10 to the 2 hertz. Now, inside the cell are microtubules. And their theory is that there's sort of this step down from the quantum field through the microtubules to, our level, which we might call the gross energetic level of 10 to the first. But the first level, the microtubules, the bundles of the microtubules, vibrate at 10 to the 3 hertz. And if you start looking at the microtubule itself, they vibrate at 10 to the 6. And the microtubule is made up of what's called tubulin. And the tubulin itself vibrates at about 10 to the 9. And the tubulin forms rings. They call pi rings. And those pi rings vibrate at 10 to the 12. And it's right at that level that there's a quantum field effect at that level of the microtubulin that going back to another theory of what's called hollow flux movement between the intrinsic and extrinsic energetic fields, that right at that point that there is a continuation, let's say how can I say it, a creation of awareness at that point, at that vibrational level within the cell. So at 10 to the 12th, and probably faster, awareness arises and then is stepped down through the tubulin to the neurons and finally into the energetic field of the brain itself. So I'm just, throwing that out as the fact that there are much higher frequencies within the cells themselves than we can possibly be aware of or vibrate. And Hammerhoff has been experimenting with sound frequencies at these higher frequencies, like 10 to the 3, and sort of zapping his own brain with these frequencies to see what sort of results he can get. He's been getting some very interesting changes in experiences that he's had. It's still pretty much in the experimental phase, and I don't think there's much written up on it. But that's just sort of throw that into the mix. We can think about that too, that there are these frequencies that are so high. 10 to the 12th is like an incredible energetic level that we would never be conscious of or even able to use.
Well, of course, and there's pure energy too. I mean, we're in a physical body, and that's many, many steps down from all of that.
And yet that's happening within the cell itself at the level of the microtubulin.
I think that yes, there are all sorts of levels that we have no idea about, that I even would suggest that you would go further up from there. I don't, but the mechanism of how it gets from there into, our physical reality, we really don't know what the mechanisms are, and we don't know what the effects are. And the fact that he's zapping himself like that, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I understand.
But it's all in the name of science, right?
Myself like that. I wouldn't want to be changing my DNA. I mean, I don't know how it changes. So, but that's, I think it's very interesting what you're suggesting and what he's trying to do, but I also think it could be very dangerous. What we're talking about, I mean, we live with every day. It's, and I think that, a lot of negative sound noise gets in that we're not aware of, that is doing a lot of damage that, we don't know anything about, and is at the cellular level, is at the DNA level. So, that's my personal opinion. I know for myself, the only music I've been listening to lately has been, the spa music, okay, bowls and so on and so forth, because there's just too much noise pollution in our environment right now. And for me, that seems to separate it out a lot easier for me. But again, I think that the point that's been brought up by John, and that is that everybody is very individual. We all respond very differently to different forms of meditation, to different techniques, and to sound itself. And that you need to work with whatever works best for you. But keep in mind that we are very entrainable to one another, and that you do want to maintain some individuality of your own field and keep it separate from sort of the masses, especially in this period when there's going to be a lot of flux and a lot of
I've found that for me, didgeridoos have taken me into very, profound meditation states. And I think Oksana would probably know something about didgeridoos from her world. And we have a couple of Australians staying with us right now. So I've tried to learn to play the didgeridoo, but I can just never get that circular breathing.
Well, I have one too, and I can't get the breathing right either, but I have had sound treatments by shamans who use the didgeridoo, and it is absolutely amazing.
There it is. She's got one.
It's wonderful. Yeah. It's a very, and they're using that for healing.
Yeah,
they're actually applying that to, you know, different muscles. And
I had a meditation with a didgeridoo, listening to a didgeridoo player at Esalen one year, and I went into very deep meditation, and I saw literally how the didgeridoo was being used by the Aborigines, you know, thousands of years ago, and how they would at night turn the didgeridoos and the bull roarers out in the circle that they had to warn the animals, the large animals. I mean, at the time, they probably had very large mammals in that area. And the growling and the sounds that they could make on theirs, just letting them know this was not their area. This was a protected area. And yet at the same time, when needed, turning the sound into the circle to heal and to, you know, bring the energy levels of the people up. So it was a very profound, you know, kind of experience to see that. I don't know what connection I had to the Aborigines. I've never been to Australia, but it was certainly very clear in that meditation.
You should come and try it, Gary.
Yes.
It's fun.
One of these days.
Yeah. I mentioned before that, you know, when people are playing didgeridoo, and I mean, I had kind of one of these healing sessions when I described it before, when the sound coming out of didgeridoo was, or basically the end of didgeridoo was focused on my spine, right? And it was moving, and it created the same sound wave, similar to what sound wave I received from crystal bowls. It was just massaging with the sound, my whole spine, activating it, creating more movement there. And of course, you know, all the blocks, all the stress, all the tension goes away because it's a very powerful wave, right? And yes, you know, Aboriginals, they have very deep tradition of sound. And I also want to remind another thing that there is an idea very popular here about bird tribe. Sounds very esoteric and with little science behind, but with what we learned today, I think that it has some science behind, because Australia is very rich, you know, in amount of birds that we have here. And I even know, I think even I mentioned that story before, that Aboriginals, one of Aboriginals who went to the army and ended up, you know, participating in some military actions, and he basically, when he got back home to Australia, he decided to go in the bush and listen to the birds, and that was his healing. And I mean, literally the amount of birds that you can hear and the way they sing, it might be the case that they kind of help to tune and heal, you know, the vibration of Earth, kind of creating this counter resonance to all the pollution that Deborah said we have, and I completely agree with that. So it may be one of the healing that they do naturally, nature does. And just to conclude a little bit, I think from all the webinars on music and on sound, yes, it's very individual what you can do and how you get to this higher states, balanced states. But I think sound and music, they are very largely associated with alpha sensualization, very powerful, one of the powerful channels that kind of opens up the bridge and opens up all other frequencies for you. So it's kind of, especially if you create the sound yourself, it goes back and it's kind of creates this loop, and you automatically start, you know, tuning, retuning, readjusting. It's feeding and readjusting itself. That's what I, you know, totally believe. And it's interesting, I never heard, but Deborah may comment a little bit more on that. She mentioned that the way our brain processes sound is quite complex. It's more complex than we process how our visual channel works.
That just reminded me, as you were saying that, we did have a meditation session with a half dozen people, and one of the people there played the didgeridoo. And we monitored him as he was playing the didgeridoo and as all the rest of the people in the circle were listening to him. And we saw the brainwaves dive down into a nice alpha theta patterns on almost everyone and begin to open up into a more awakened mind pattern. Almost everybody went very deep as he was playing, probably for about a half hour. So it was very interesting. It just reminded me that we did that, and I'd completely forgotten about it.
And to that point, you will find a lot of people fall asleep. They go into theta and delta, and so that is very common.
Yeah, and no one actually fell asleep. They were all very conscious, of the music and what was going on around them.
But were they also meditators?
No.
They weren't. Okay, so
no.
All right, so they weren't. Okay, because a lot of times with trained meditators who, are bathed with the didgeridoo, you will not fall asleep. But if you're new to meditation and you first hear one of these sound baths, it is very easy to fall asleep. A lot of people.
Yes.
I've had people fall asleep and start snoring. So again, it just emphasizes what Oksana was saying, what you're saying, is that alpha theta. Certainly the alpha bridge that then will progress in many people, some people down deeper into theta and then to delta, definitely into delta.
And I've had many people fall asleep and complain about the person snoring next to them.
Well, actually, they really, the ones who didn't fall asleep would have liked to have moved the snorer. But the ones who were asleep, they didn't care about the snoring. But I think to Oksana's point, there is something universal about sound. There's no doubt about it. Universal, that is fundamentally built into our DNA, into human DNA in terms of sound. But each person will react differently to the sounds too, and not the same sound doesn't work for everyone. Different people will have different preferences, let's put it that way. Maybe that's partly genetic, maybe that's environmental. And back to Oksana's point about nature, I know for myself, I will go out in nature, that's meditative for me, and I will literally listen to the wind, I will listen to the birds. I could listen to them all day, all night. I mean, it is so restful, so peaceful, and at the same time energizing in a really healthy sense. Not in an anxiety sense, but just a balancing sense. And so I totally agree with you, Oksana. I wish we had the variety of bird songs here, but at least in the spring, it's just wonderful. And that may be another reason why, obviously there are biological reasons, there are circadian rhythm reasons why people get activated and more energetic and feel more alive in the spring, like they're being reborn, but also nature is being reborn. And again, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. Not only are we primarily fluid, but our planet is primarily fluid. We have a lot of water on this planet. There is a lot of water that also transmits that sound. And Tom Kenyon is known for doing sound healing on the planet itself, literally sinking quartz crystals, digging holes deep into the earth, sinking quartz crystals to act as antenna for then whole sound baths where he'll do webinars, live webinars where everyone sounds together, through the webinar or at home privately, and hopefully that is going to resonate across the whole planet itself. So to your point, Oksana, nature itself has the way of feeding sound into itself to heal and renew it.
And can I just comment on that? So if you're looking at alpha, this 8 to 14 roughly frequencies, and of course we haven't even brought up the idea of harmonics, but there's a
Yes,
world we talked about in terms of harmonics.
and that's the Schumann frequency of the
That's,
planet.
that's right.
That is the Schumann frequency.
That's right. And so there's this range in everything. So then the question becomes, what is for each of us our resonant frequency? What is the keynote of our souls? And I think that maybe that might be the difference between why some people respond to things and some people don't. And so in that sense, if that's true, then how important is it to find out what is your keynote?
Yes.
And I wonder if maybe your little cymatic app that you had there, Deborah, wouldn't be like a little sound mirror for people to be able to find that keynote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it now is going to depend on what, if the pictures that are displayed to you resonate with you. So
Yes.
there might be a particular picture, cymatic picture that really resonates with you, and then you can work backwards. Well, that's associated with this sound or this toning, and that becomes your signature. I think that's a very good point. I think it's an excellent idea and a great insight. I mean, that to me is what cymatics is all about. And that's, to people who are working in the field of cymatics, that's their whole point. They've got to have a way, we need a mechanism to connect the sound and our keynote and be invisible, if you will. We need a way of making it visible to ourselves. That was what drew me to the mind mirror. Making the brain visible, okay, to find the keynote brain patterns that work best for that individual. That's what drew me to your mind mirror, okay? It is to find a keynote, a way of a bridge to what we know and understand and can relate to, that then translates to what is universal and cosmic and invisible.
Well, now, how cool would that be to hook yourself up to the mind mirror and have this cymatics app of yours and then do some toning? Now, you're going to get a little bit of artifact. Not always, but sometimes you get artifact if you're doing toning. But still, once the sound stops, the brainwave might well still go. Now, maybe you're going to find that you'll have a cumulative effect from the toning, and then it's hard to separate which tone, which note. But I'll just bet you that the combination of your singing the notes, feeling what's because, we talk in a certain range, so our keynote's going to be somewhere within our own vocal range.
Mm-hmm.
So you're singing your keynote, you're hooked up to the mind mirror, you're looking at the visual, something's going to pop. You're going to find that keynote real fast.
You might, but I think that is an excellent way of going about it, because it's a feedback loop, and we are very much wired to recognize feedback and to respond to feedback and to increase our behavior according to feedback. So I absolutely agree. That's what I did when I first got the mind mirror. I was sounding, I was playing bowls, but I got a lot of artifact. Remember, you told me a lot of artifact. We got all sorts of stuff. But again, to combine these modalities to, in fact, inform us. That's what this is all about, to bring us the insight, the information that triggers us to become the best we can be, our greatest potential. So yes, these are all the tools. Going back to what Oksana was asking about the ears and why, we haven't been paying too much attention to sound and how complex it is in terms of the brain. Binaural beats tells you just how complex it is. You send two different frequencies to each ear. Each ear gets a different frequency. It automatically takes the difference between the frequencies. So again, our brain is interpreting, our brain is filtering information, and we have to understand that interpretation process so that we can effectively manipulate the system or understand the system. And, the visual system is real straightforward. You've got certain you know, certain neurons that recognize color, that recognize, you know, dark versus light. I mean, it's much better laid out. It's almost a grid. They found it first in the animal model. It was very easy to replicate in the human model. So that's what they sat on. All right. Meanwhile, we're not that great. Our vision isn't all that great. I mean, you know, compared to mammals. But nonetheless, it was an easy system to work with. They are now starting to work with the auditory system. But binaural beats work this way. You send two different frequencies to each ear, and the brain takes the difference, which is matched to a certain brainwave. So it's a certain brainwave frequency, either alpha or theta or delta or beta. And that's how binaural beats work. So you can look at that in terms of cymatics as you're listening to binaural beats specifically, and you can see the complexity of your cymatic pattern from that.
I'm just wondering, just as a general question, how many people have actually monitored people listening to various binaurals such as HemiSync, HoloSync, iAwake?
They haven't compared them. No.
We've looked at quite a number of them, and for some people they seem to be effective, and for other people, even after using them for weeks or months, nothing is happening for them.
I tried it. I did not feel it was very effective for me, and I didn't feel that. I actually did binaural with the mind mirror, and I didn't see that the frequency it was supposed to be producing was coming out. I also used my emotive. I used my insight emotive, and I wasn't getting more of one frequency versus another. So I don't know. All right,
yeah,
but I know what the brain is doing. It is subtracting. It is taking the difference between the two frequencies. How that works then on brain waves, well, that's another jump.
Yeah, it just didn't seem to be, sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, but, you know, in producing the brain wave that it's supposed to be. And of course, when you're looking at a single frequency range, you know, it's like alpha 7 or 8 hertz or 9 hertz or something. You can't get the complexity of the brainwave patterns with brain sound drivers, audio drivers, that you would get in, you know, maybe listening to a didgeridoo or something like that. So I'm never really convinced that all of these audio drivers are as effective as people claim them to be, because they've never actually monitored them.
Actually, years ago, the great Elmer Green did, and made a comment that he felt like the HoloSync technology, that Bill was pushing it, and that there has to be an internal driver along with it to make it happen. I thought, well, for Elmer Green wired it up, that's pretty good. And that was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, and I think that what you earlier brought up in terms of intention and belief system, you have to really feel that it is going to help, or at least that it's not going to hurt, that it's going to be beneficial, because if you block it, you know, if you just won't have any part of it, and you really, you know, you don't want the person working on you through sound. So it's very important that you put the person in a state that's more receptive. So we generally say, you know, close your eyes, think about white light coming down into your head and focused in your heart, and then spreading out from your heart to get that person in a more receptive state. So how the person, whether the person is receptive, and this is the same for hypnosis too. I mean, if you're blocking, if you're specifically trying to block you know, the suggestion, then, you know, the suggestion is going to have a very tough time getting through for that particular person. And I think that the same thing for sound therapy, for hands-on healing, for prayer, you have to at least be open to the modality and feel that, you know, maybe it will do something. I mean, we have underestimated the placebo effect. There is a very strong effect of belief and intention. And, you know, what your mind believes and where your mind goes is what's going to work for you.
I think that we could actually, that there's enough interest and excitement about this that we could do another program on sound healing, or maybe even a working group just for a general conversation, because I see that Brainwave Bob is here with us from Copenhagen, and he is totally into sound healing. I know that Tamara is a singer and sings, and Gary and Donna, I mean, all of us have a tremendous, I mean, because ultimately what we're talking about here is vibration, and you're talking brainwaves, you're talking vibration. I mean, this is the one subject that links together all other subjects. Mm-hmm. So I'd say, why don't we meet again as a working group and just share some of our ideas and insights about this, and see where it takes us. Somewhere down the line, do it again. But this has just been marvelous, Deborah. I mean, so much wonderful information. I really appreciate your organization.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to throw a very wide net. That was my whole purpose. Just, there is so much out there that is not really connected up. But if you're at least exposed to it, it will definitely make you think and bring all sorts of personal insights.
Well, it certainly gave us things to think about. I had one question about, when you mentioned cymatics, I was wondering if you were also familiar with centics.
No.
Okay, because that's it came out of actually the emotions, the expression of emotions in music. And the fellow who's, I think he used to be in Australia, and I don't remember his name right offhand, but he studied with Pablo Casal. And he said he was studying at a very high level in the cello. And he said many people that studied with Pablo Casal technically were very proficient. But when Pablo would play something, he put a good deal of emotion into it. And he couldn't quite figure out how, at first, how he was able to express that emotion, playing the same keys, the same notes, the same strings as everybody else who were very proficient, but didn't have the emotional expression.
Wow.
And what he discovered was that it was the difference in the pressure of the fingers that expressed the emotion. So he would put a different pressure on the same key note on the string, and stroke it just ever so slightly in a different way. And so he developed a technique of measuring the emotional patterns by the pressure you put onto a particular pad. He developed a pad that would measure the depth and movement of, you would think of being angry or being happy or something like that. So he developed an entire repertoire of physical pressures that related, so there's kinesthetic expressions of emotions that were related to vibrational frequencies. And then others, I read about this some time ago, I think in Australia, that the musicians had programmed computers to play music. And they could take a musical piece, but they would change the expression of the emotion by changing the slight variations in the pressures of the notes that they were playing actually on the computer. Or the computer would do this actually, so that the music would sound very happy or very sad or very angry or very, have all these different emotional expressions. But it comes down to basically the pressure of the muscular kinesthetic system expressing that. And that, that is in a way, a very subtle kind of frequency that we don't necessarily think about. But that muscular expression is also, you might think in terms of a sound expression as well, is expressed that way. So with centric cycles is another aspect. It was tied in with music and with sound and the expression of emotion through sound. And you might be interested in looking into that.
That's fascinating, and it's a fascinating insight because playing the theremin, that's exactly what they have to learn to also incorporate.
Yes.
Because the pressure, how they come into the field and how they exit that field changes everything. So in playing for it to actually sound like music and replicate a musical piece that is, you know, written down with notes, they have to incorporate that kinesthetic sense.
Yes.
And the pressure with how they interact with the electromagnetic field. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's but I had never heard of that. So thank you very much for that insight.
I thought at first when you said cymatic, you meant centig, which is centig is S-E-N-T-I-C.
Okay. Yeah. No. I was strictly talking about cymatics. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I just really want to say that whoever is willing to take the next turn in exploring the sound in whatever way, or come up and practice with other people in a little working group, some exercises, you're very, very welcome. Or suggest any other topic really related to what we are exploring in, you know, about brainwaves and field and consciousness and meditation, you're very welcome always. And for today, I think it's a great lecture or webinar and working group in a way, discussion, because we all have something to say. We have our observations. So thank you, Deborah. It was a pleasure to have you again with us. And
my pleasure too.
Thank you, Deborah.
I'm very glad
Thank you,
to see all other members. If, you know, whoever Judith mentioned was today with us, you know, Brainwave Bob, Tamura, you're very welcome to join whenever you feel ready. Okay, thank you everyone, and see you next time.
All right, thank you.